Welcome into another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler, hanging out with Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Fellas, we've been working on this rookie cash, stash, and trash series, and we're into week 3 of it. We've already covered the AFC and NFC East, followed by the AFC and NFC South last week. This week, we're going to head north to the AFC and NFC North, talk about some really high-end rookies, fellas. But first, let's see how the weekend treated you and how everything's going. Ryan, how's it going, bud?
Yeah, things are good here. Getting ready for a little time away, a little vacation coming up.
Yeah.
We didn't have any superstars traded this weekend. That was a little disappointing.
Yeah, nothing big to talk about. You know, I looked at the gauntlet of teams we were going to talk about. I'm like, who's the big move that could be made? And then I remember, oh yeah, Matt, the Packers are on this week's show, so we don't need a big move on this week's agenda.
Please no. Unless you know it's. Unless we're like, I don't know who we could get to make it okay, but probably nobody.
A new general manager.
That's probably
that I guess would be okay. Yeah.
That's probably a different show. As I said, we've been covering these rookies, going pick by pick through the teams and trying to throw in a few undrafted free agents that matter as well. There are a lot of big names on today's show. We get to talk about guys like Najee Harris and Jermar Chase, and of course, Justin Fields as well. So let's kick it off right at the top in the AFC North. We'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they did make the big splash, Ryan. It was Najee Harris out of Alabama, 24th pick in the first round, so has the draft capital. Of course, he has that great landing spot, the maybe ideal landing spot, as we all have talked about throughout the offseason. How do we feel about Harris? It's going to be difficult to go anywhere other than cash with this guy.
Oh, yeah. You got to go cash with Najee Harris. And as I was looking over the names, the players that we're going to talk about today, I was thinking back all the rookie conversations we've had over the past 5 or 6 weeks. I think we've been a little hard on Najee Harris. This has been an anti-Najee Harris pod and probably a little too far with that. Harris is certainly cash. Concerns about the offensive line that we've talked plenty of times about, but he's going to get the volume, and ultimately that's what really matters for running backs. So in the short term, for the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years, certainly a cash player.
What do you think the rookie upside of Najee Harris is? If you're drafting him in a rookie draft, what's the ultimate? Everything goes right for Pittsburgh. They're feeding him the ball. Where does he land among running backs?
We saw Saquon Barkley finish as the RB1 as a rookie. Even though that was just 3 years ago now, I don't think that's necessarily in the reasonable realm of possibilities, realm of outcomes. But I think he could certainly be a top 6 or 8 running back for sure.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking as well. And I guess in a perfect world, maybe he does squeeze all the way into the top 2 or 3. But I'm with you. I don't know if number 1 overall is in the cards for him, but certainly has RB1 upside. Matt, I'm sure you're with us. He's a cash guy.
Yeah, definitely cash. We may have hated on him, I guess, if you want to say that. But I think it's more just because we're also excited about Travis Etienne and what he's going to be able to do. But, yeah, he is the best rookie running back for 2021. After that, I think we might have a little bit of question marks, the direction of that team without Ben Roethlisberger. The offensive line clearly needs to get better, right? And his ultimate upside, I think, is going to be, if it depends on his volume in the passing game, I think, because if he goes into like a Le'Veon Bell kind of role where he's going to see 90 targets, I don't really see that for him just based on who they have in the receiving game with those 3 wide receivers and now 2 tight ends, right? So that's a little bit tough to see, but I agree with you guys. Running back 6, 7, somewhere in there, I think is definitely within the range of possibilities for him. So absolute cash for year 1.
I was going to say the same thing, Matt, that I think his upside does basically come down to his role in the passing game or his role as a receiver. That's what boosted Saquon to that RB1 spot, is so many targets in that offense. And I don't necessarily think any of the other Steelers running backs have proven that they should be that pass catching back. I think it's just what you're talking about. Deontay Johnson, Juju and Claypool stealing the targets, and maybe Pittsburgh just not even using the running back as a pass catcher all that much.
If though Ben looks as bad as he did last year, like throwing the ball down the field, maybe he does become a dump off quarterback in his last probably season in the league. So it's possible.
Either way, that's an elite type of rookie season. So, Ryan, you led in with, maybe we've been a little too negative when it comes to Najee Harris and hit this landing spot and all the things that come along. I think everybody out there is getting the rose-colored glasses view of Najee Harris. That seems like everything I hear out there. And I just don't see things being quite that great. I know the landing spot's good, and traditionally they tend to go with one running back, and they're on the field all the time, and that all points to great things. But that offensive line still is a concern. There are reasons to believe that he may struggle, especially in the first half of his rookie season, until that offensive line gels. So while we do see that upside, there is a little bit there's cause for concern with that backfield as well for Najee Harris. Maybe a funner guy to talk about, because we get to project a little bit more long-term, might be Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. He went in the second round, fellas, to the Pittsburgh Steelers, lands in a place where traditionally you see that inline tight end making a little bit of noise. We've seen a few guys go through there over the last 15 years or so, Matt, that have been fantasy contributors. And sure, a lot of those guys have been low-end tight end ones at best, but certainly they offer a little bit of a floor. Now, Freiermuth has a little bit of that field stretching ability. He can get down the seam. He can make plays in the red zone. I think there's quite a bit of upside when it comes to Freiermuth and what he can do for an offense, especially as that inline tight end. So while there maybe isn't a direct path to immediate playing time, he's an obvious stash when it comes to what he might do in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, he's really interesting even in 2021, because if they, now they have the ability with Ebron for one more year at least to run more 12 personnel, but they have those three wide receivers. So are they going to do it? If they do, then you would think that Ebron's going to be the pass catcher and Freiermuth's going to be the blocker, because he's really good at that, right? So I think if he's going to find a path to fantasy upside in his rookie season, it's going to have to be through touchdowns. Maybe he's a low reception guy, but he has 6 to 8 touchdowns, something like that. So that's the path to cash, I think. But for me, he's going to be that borderline stash player, right on the edge.
Yeah, stash player for me as well, basically for the same reasons that you guys have laid out, and kind of the same thing we mentioned with Harris, just a concern about not only Ebron there, but the three elite wide receivers, or at least borderline elite wide receivers. Even if we assume Juju's probably gone after this year, still a lot of competition for targets in general. And then just the unknown of what that offense, what that passing game will be in 2022 and beyond.
We got to be careful there, Ryan, making those assumptions. I think we all were guilty of that a year ago. And Juju signed that dotted line, and we all said, whoa, you kidding me? We didn't expect him to go back there. So either way, though, you make some good points there with a pass catching tight end with all those weapons. Sure, maybe somebody moves on next year and that creates more opportunities. But typically it feels to me, guys, that he's more in line with the traditional tight end that we always say it takes 2 or 3 years to develop, and then suddenly they become a bigger part of the offense. You might have to wait on Freiermuth, and that's why you're waiting till the second and sometimes maybe even the very early picks in the third round to grab him in your rookie drafts. Let's jump over to their division rivals, fellas, because the Baltimore Ravens also invested a first-round pick in a stud offensive skill player. That was Rashod Bateman out of Minnesota. So late in the first, they grab another wide receiver, Ryan. And we all know about Lamar Jackson and maybe the storyline of his lack of ability to get the ball to receivers accurately, especially down the field. Of course, we know he likes to use his legs. There's so many names that we're intrigued with in Baltimore as pass catchers, right? And we're all kind of scratching our head as to who's going to grab the bull by the horns and become the number one guy. Bateman is a jack of all trades. He can do it all. He'll work all parts of the field. He's shown enough speed to get downfield and the route running to work underneath. Seems like a direct path to maybe make it a big impact. So an interesting player, Rashod Bateman. How do we feel about him? Cash, stash, or trash?
This was the hardest one for me to categorize. Ultimately, I went with stash. I mean, you look at this Baltimore offense, it's the same thing that we've heard on every podcast, seen in every article. The Ravens passing game, it just the volume concern, right? I mean, they were last in pass attempts last year. They were last in completions last year. They were last in passing yards last year. And now they add these two wide receivers. We'll talk about Tylan Wallace in a moment. And it's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. Were they that bad because they didn't have quality receivers to throw to, and now these guys will change that? Or are they bad, or I shouldn't even say bad, just that low passing volume, because that's the offense. They're going to be run heavy. Lamar's, inefficiency basically. And I don't know the answer. I called Bateman a stash player. I see the route you're talking about. That sure, could he be the top target on this team ahead of Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews? He could be as a rookie. That wouldn't shock me. Am I willing to bet on that in the late first round? Not really. I'm probably going elsewhere with my pick in that range.
How about you, Matt? Are you investing in Bateman where you have the chance late in the first round, or are you thinking somebody else will have to stash him?
Yeah, he's a tough one because I love him so much, but it just seems difficult to find the path to impactful weekly performance, at least as a rookie, right? I mean, the Marquise Brown led the team in targets last year with only 100. He had 100 targets, and he was the top target getter, 25.5% target share. So obviously really good. So that's probably going to come down. I kind of feel like Bateman is going to affect the other weapons on the offense necessarily more than he's going to be reliable. And then, Mark Andrews at only 14 games, 88 targets. So, he's going to fit somewhere in there. I think you're going to see both Brown and Bateman probably be in like that 70 plus, 75 plus target range. And Andrews probably around where he was last year. And, is that really enough to go around? I don't like to make the too many mouths to feed argument, but when you're in a passing offense that has that low of a volume, it becomes more relevant, I think, right? So I'm going to say stash, but I could definitely see him being a cash player if he just takes like most of Marquise Brown targets,
I mean, that just shows how difficult this situation is to figure out. That we made in the same conversation, we made the argument of there's too many mouths to feed, and they had no talent last year to throw to. And I really don't know which one it is. I don't know if this totally fits in this conversation, but it's one of my favorite, just weird little stats that I've found over the years. The Ravens have not had a wide receiver one, a season-long wide receiver one in Lamar Jackson's lifetime. It's been that long since they've had a top 12 wide receiver.
Really? I guess
Michael Jackson.
No, Mason never did it. It was Michael Jackson.
Oh, okay.
Wow. I would have thought that Bolden got there, but I guess not. He had to get close.
I think, Mason and Bolden, of course, both of those guys finished up there. And
998, 991.
Yeah. I think
Torrey Smith. I mean, come on.
Oh, come on. Seriously?
Yeah. Of course, wide receiver ones, it does take more than 1,000 yards seasons.
Yeah.
They just traditionally spread the football around, right? And nothing's going to change, especially with Lamar Jackson as your quarterback and being the most run-heavy team in the league. As much as we love those running backs, and usually we can go down the depth chart with the running backs, it's hard to get too excited about the second and third pass-catching option. And sometimes even the number one pass-catching option, as that stat would kind of point you to. I tried hard to make him a cash player. I searched. I looked around, tried to find the thing that would point me to cash and point me to thinking, I want him in my lineup 5, 6, 8, 10 times this year, and it just doesn't exist. We're just hoping, really, when it comes to Bateman, that talent is so great that he takes that offense to the next level and really unlocks Lamar's accuracy or makes him more of a dynamic timing passer Bateman, maybe he's that good, but we have no evidence to say that's going to happen, though, right?
So Lamar Jackson threw the ball 376 times last year. How many times does he need to throw the ball to have a receiver that has 130 targets even? So you got to throw 450. Does he got to get up to 500? Because that's never going to happen, right? They're never going to throw the ball 500 times.
Well, he's going to drop back 500 times.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Choose to run 80 times, get sacked a few times, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, your point is well taken, though, Matt. That there's just not enough volume in that passing attack for one single option to really explode, at least without a massive touchdown number. Right? We need one guy to catch 15 touchdowns. And, Andrews is really the guy that you'd point at as the guy that could lead that team in touchdowns, get double digits.
I was going to say the same thing about touchdowns, Dan. And despite being so low, I mentioned the pass volume numbers being last in all those categories. And we all knew that anyway. They were middle of the pack in passing touchdowns. I think they had 22 as a team last year. So that is the path. Do you guys think that Bateman is closer to cash than he is trash?
Yes.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. But it's going to take that touchdown volume. He's going to have to, and he's probably going to have to be a little bit different player than what we even saw at Minnesota. A lot of that was that elite route running and being able to get separation. That's going to obviously be important in Baltimore as well, but he's going to have to be that guy that can sneak in behind linebackers in that play action game, and Lamar's going to have to hit him in stride and make those big plays. We just see so many different players make the plays like that over the last few years. I just think of Willie Snead just coming out of nowhere and having that big game, and then you don't hear from him for 4 or 5 weeks. Those are the kind of things that we've come to kind of call normal when it comes to that Baltimore pass catching core. So it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit odd. Bateman does feel like the most talented receiver that Lamar Jackson has ever played with. I guess, did he play with Devontae Parker at Louisville? I don't remember.
No.
They didn't overlap?
They did not.
So Bateman's probably the best receiver he's ever played with, which is something. We got to see him with a talent like this.
Well, I mean, the ultimate thing is, and there's been a lot of conversation in the community too about, will the Ravens change their offense because they spent this first-round pick? Does that mean that that's a sign of that? And why would they? I mean, I know they haven't, they haven't broken through and won a title, but I mean, they've been very successful, especially over the past couple of years with this offense. And along with, we've talked about Hollywood Brown. I mean, they still have some players that the dynasty managers like, right? We're still waiting on Devin Duvernay and Miles Boykin. They brought in Sammy Watkins for whatever that's worth. And we know they always like to use 2 tight ends. They still have Nick Boyle who always gets snaps, and they traded for Josh Oliver, a deep tight end that is hanging on to the end of dynasty rosters too. So why would they give one guy 150 targets? They don't have to.
Yeah. Right. And we haven't really seen, I would like to see to think that Lamar Jackson's going to take another step forward. They're going to continue to involve the offense, all that stuff. But we've never really seen Greg Roman get past this stage with these running quarterbacks, whether it was Tyrod or whether it was with Colin Kaepernick. We've just never seen him move to that next phase with these rushing quarterbacks. So it would be a first time for that as well.
Right. And all this ties back into the 4th round pick. That is Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State, a guy that I think, I really liked going into the draft and thought he was going to be a day 2 player. Ryan, you talk about this regularly. There's not a big track record of day 3 wide receivers turning into star players, at least for us as fantasy players. There's plenty of names that you can throw out there that, well, he was a really productive pro, had a really nice career, but that didn't translate to fantasy necessarily. Wallace is a great competitor, and he has that killer instinct to go get the football. Those are all good things. But because of that 4th round draft capital, there's not a lot pointing to even stash when it comes to if we're not willing to go with cash with Rashod Bateman, can we even do a stash with Tylan Wallace?
Yeah, I did go with stash for him,
okay.
But it's of course the deeper stash. You need more roster spots. You need more patience with him, because if we're waiting on on Brown. I mean, really, we're still waiting on Hollywood Brown to break out, let alone Duvernay and Wallace and these guys. So need some patience, but I'm with you. I liked him pre-draft, was disappointed he did fall to day 3, and that's, it's not a deal breaker, but it certainly doesn't help, and your percentages go way down.
Matt, what are your thoughts when it comes to Wallace?
Future roster clogger of dynasty rosters, I think. Yeah, just if Bateman and Brown and to a lesser extent Andrews can't get the volume that we really want to see, I just don't see how Wallace is going to get there, anytime in the near future necessarily. I think he's basically the same player as Devin Duvernay, like similar size. I think they're 5'10", 5'11", both of them, both around 200 pounds, both very good in the slot and downfield. Duvernay maybe a little faster, but similar players. And I think they drafted Duvernay a round higher than they took Tylan Wallace. So I think he's going to be a roster clogger, but I could see a stash, but I'm going trash.
Yeah, I'm going to lean towards trash as well. It's probably because of the landing spot. As excited as we were that Bateman landed in Baltimore, and I think there's at least a handful of us that thought that was a nice landing spot and could work out well for us as dynasty managers. Seeing a second receiver go there, that wasn't the path to future dynasty value. So I marked him down as trash myself. He's the guy we're getting in the 3rd round of rookie drafts, right? So we're not investing a whole lot. He's probably going to sit on some rosters before we ever get him into our starting lineup. Got to get through the rest of this AFC North. It probably won't take long to get through the Cleveland Browns. They invested in skill positions twice, guys. Of course, they're stacked, both running back and wide receiver. Not a lot of room for playing time at either of those positions. But in the 3rd round, wide receiver Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn gets a little bit of that day 2 draft capital, Matt. And then later in the 6th round, Demetric Felton out of UCLA. He's kind of a tweener running back wide receiver. What are our thoughts on these guys? Any value we can uncover here?
I don't think so. Not for me. Schwartz is interesting, but there's just so much ahead of him. Maybe you could consider him a stash. I think if you think this changes from a wide receiver standpoint is going to change drastically in 2022. But for this season, I can't really see him getting on the field too much. And I liked a lot of what Donovan Peoples-Jones did towards the end of the season, of 2020. So I kind of feel like I would rather invest in him if I'm going to invest in one of these kind of peripheral wide receivers for the Browns. So I'll say trash if I didn't say that.
Yeah, I ultimately went trash with Schwartz as well. I mean, really the only thing that gave me pause was the draft capital. I was surprised to see him get that day 2 draft capital. I think he's a little bit of a one-trick pony with the speed as his calling card. His numbers did improve over the years, over his career at Auburn, so that's a good sign. But I'm with you. I was kind of liking what we saw from Peoples-Jones last year. And with the bigger names, the veterans still there, I mean, we're at least waiting a full year, maybe 2 for Schwartz. So ultimately, I went trash with him.
Yeah, I was on the very low end of stash when it comes to Schwartz because he does have that electric speed, and there is an opportunity perhaps to get on the field as a part-time player, field stretcher as a rookie. And then maybe that turns into something bigger down the road. But again, a lot like what you said about Wallace, Ryan, probably takes a big roster, probably takes a lot of depth on a roster to be able to hold on to him all year this year and then into next year. But because of that 3rd round draft capital, has a little bit of that pedigree because of that speed that he showed in college, and he was pretty good in his final year at Auburn. I'm going to call him a low-end stash player. Cincinnati Bengals, one of the biggest names in Dynasty right now, Ryan. It's Jermar Chase. Of course, he had the huge season with Joe Burrow at LSU. Now he's reunited with his former quarterback. This is going to be cash all the way to the bank.
Yep, total cash play for me from day one. We've seen 7 rookie wide receivers to score 230 fantasy points in a season. I think he becomes number 8. That certainly is helped with that additional game this year. But I think Chase has a has a great season, even with that competition there. Obviously love him being reunited with his college quarterback.
Matt, does the depth chart there in Cincinnati, of course, T. Higgins last year had a really nice rookie season, and Tyler Boyd has been a solid wide receiver 3 for Dynasty managers for quite a while now. Does that give you any pause, or is he right to the bank with the cash play?
I don't think so, just because with the level of the numbers that Burrow has put up as a passer. I think there was one game last season he threw the ball like 70 times or 68 times, something like that. So I think all 3 of these receivers are going to be in that 100 target range with Chase and Higgins. Obviously, I think less volume dependent than Boyd. So Chase is definitely cash all the way in year 1.
Yeah, he's cash. I've had this trade in my inbox for almost a week. It's my only copy of Jamar Chase, and I'm getting Calvin Ridley back, one of the only leagues that I don't have Ridley, and there's some other pieces involved, and I just keep staring at it. I hate doing that to somebody, but man, it's hard to trade that guy because of that just magical upside.
They know your kryptonite, Dan.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I don't hide it very well, do I? There was one other. Go ahead.
Who's more likely to be the Dynasty wide receiver 1 a year from now, Chase or Ridley?
Well, I don't think Ridley has a chance.
I don't either.
It's Chase, right?
You got enough. You got enough Ridley.
I probably have enough Ridley. You're right. Probably, not for sure. Let's jump over to Chris Evans, the Michigan tailback that was a 6th round pick to Cincinnati. There's a little bit of room behind Joe Mixon. Of course, Giovanni Bernard, Matt, moved on. He was a free agent and signed in Tampa Bay. So Mixon's been banged up. Is there anything here with Chris Evans, who he was a big time recruit, showed a few spurts at Michigan of a playmaking tailback? There might be a sliver of chance down the road with him.
Maybe. I just don't really want to place a bet on any of those guys behind Joe Mixon. Really, none of them are super exciting. Travion hasn't been able to get any traction. It seemed like they really liked to go to Pirine last year towards the end of the season. So, as gross as that sounds, it seems like he probably has an inside track for the backup role or change of pace role, even behind Mixon, and maybe even the lead back duties if Mixon were to get hurt again. So I think Evans is really going to have to really impress in camp. So he's somebody to watch. He's going to be somebody to watch in camp to see how he does. But I think it's a kind of a long road. So I'm gonna throw him into the trash category. But there's a chance for stash, I guess.
Ryan, he's undrafted in most rookie drafts.
Yeah.
Outside of the ones where it's full of Cincinnati Bengals fans, maybe, or Michigan Wolverines fans at that. So if any kind of stash, he's super, super deep. Is there anything for you there?
Not really. His ADP is 5.03. That's in Superflex rookie drafts. So yeah, in most leagues, that means he is going undrafted. When you're looking at Samaje Perine and Travion Williams as your competition, and you're still not sure, that's not a good sign. So, yeah, I think ultimately trash for Chris Evans. And
there might be a little bit of value in the unknown when it comes to Evans, though. We've seen Travion Williams a little bit in spots, and certainly we've seen enough Samaje Perine to know what we're going to get there. So if I'm investing in anybody behind Mixon, it's going to be Evans. And if I don't have to give up absolutely anything, we've talked about the kitchen sink auctions many times. I've picked him up for $1 at the end of the auction in a couple of these, where it's just put him on your roster, give him maybe even put him on a Debbie roster and put him on taxi and just see what happens. I'm interested enough to do something like that in a deep, those are 30-man rosters.
Yeah, sure. With basically no investment, that's fine, especially this early, relatively early part of the offseason. You mentioned him coming into Michigan as a top recruit. And sometimes those are the types of players that I like to chase. In this case, it feels like just another disappointment. Michigan continues to bring in 5-star players, especially at the skill positions, and just none of them turn into anything really at the college level, and certainly not at the NFL level. Peoples Jones is one of the more successful Michigan players, and we know that that's not saying much at this point.
That's the
really
bottom of the roster guy too.
Yeah, I'm just avoiding Michigan players. Really.
Oh, okay. You're gonna get some hate from the Wolverines fans on Twitter for that one.
They know it's true.
Didn't you just say you like DPJ a little bit?
Yeah, he put a foot in his mouth a little bit.
Well, I said he's the best option from the Wolverines. That's bad news.
Let's go over to the NFC North before Ryan digs too big a hole there with Wolverines fans. We might as well start with the Packers. Matt, we'll throw this one to you. They got a day 2 wide receiver. It's Amari Rodgers out of Clemson. Had a really nice career there at Clemson and seems to profile well into this Packers offense. So how quickly do we think Rodgers can assimilate with Rodgers, assuming Rodgers is back at training camp?
I think this is simple as cash. If Aaron Rodgers is playing and he's a stash, I guess. If not, we did get some reports that, which I don't know. I guess you could say they're good reports if we're talking about from Amari Rodgers' perspective. We got some reports that Justin Fields is doing a lot of checkdowns, so maybe Amari Rodgers or Aaron Jones even is going to lead this team in receptions, right? If it does end up being Jordan Love, but no, I think that it's as easy as that. If it's Love, it's stash. If it's Aaron Rodgers, it's absolutely cash.
I think you had a little bit of a Freudian slip there. You said Justin Fields.
Oh, geez.
Down quite a bit.
God. I wish it was. I wish.
Oh,
I wish. Then I would be okay with Aaron moving on, I guess.
So Matt, he thinks maybe some upside for cash here with Amari Rodgers. Another guy that we're getting in the 3rd round. Ryan, do you think there's a chance there for a cash guy?
A chance, certainly. I've still got him in that stash category. I mean, as much grief and trouble as we give the Packers organization. I mean, Rodgers is pretty well known for his relationships that he has with these wide receivers. So it's hard for me to imagine, assuming he is still there, Aaron Rodgers, that is, letting this rookie overtake MVS and Lazard and the veterans that, maybe not on the level that we expect, but they've proven themselves to him. So still a stash player for me, but definitely somebody I like to grab in the late 2nd round range.
Yeah, I called him a stash as well. I really like his upside in year 2 and year 3, but that's what makes him a stash. And I agree with everything you said there. Well, they don't invest a lot in the wide receiver position. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is like a 5th round pick, and Lazard was a UDFA and picked up off the Jaguars practice squad. They love those guys, not just Rodgers, that front office, that coaching staff. They love them for different roles. Lazard's known for his blocking and his ability to get down the field and create space for Aaron Jones, who makes the big play. He's going to be on the field. So if he's on the outside, that means maybe Amari Rodgers sneaks into that slot space when you're all right having Devontae on the outside. But anybody who watches the Packers knows that Devontae slides into the slot regularly. He's always inside the numbers. So I think it's a long-term thing when it comes to Amari Rodgers, although he will have glimpses of brilliance as long as Aaron Rodgers is under center. How about the Packers running back selection late in the draft, 7th round, Kylin Hill out of Mississippi State? I'm going to call him a stash, guys, and I know that everybody will point to that running back room and say, wait a minute, there's 2 higher draft picks. One of them's already been paid if that 2nd contract, but the Packers regularly have multiple running backs in the game plan. And it's only going to take a simple injury to one of those 2 guys to put Kylin Hill in the game and potentially getting 10 or 12 touches in a football game. So I think there's going to be a game in 2021 where Kylin Hill will open the eyes of dynasty managers that did not pick him in their rookie drafts. Matt, what are your thoughts on Hill?
Yeah, I think it's fine to stash him. If God forbid Aaron Jones did go down, then AJ Dillon's going to slot right in as those early down back. But Kylin Hill is a really good receiver, so you can see him playing, at minimum in that scenario, some kind of Jamal Williams kind of role. So he has a chance to provide us with some production, I think, in year 1. But I think it's going to take an injury, and also they drafted. I don't know who do they still care about Dexter Williams? I think they drafted.
No.
I would assume not. But
I'll take that one for you. No.
I think LaFleur drafted him. Am I mistaken of that? So he's still hanging around for maybe that pass catcher role with Darius. what's his name from last year also there that they like. So I think there it is still crowded for that potential role, but it's possible. So I'll keep him as a stash.
Right.
I think he's certainly a stash. I totally agree with what you said, Dan. And honestly, at his price, his ADP is 411. Yeah. I think he's a priority stash, a player you should reach on because of all the same things that you said. And we've seen the Packers turn these late day 2, early day 3 running backs into major producers. Obviously Aaron Jones, but Jamal Williams as well. Both have been productive and were major hits for dynasty players who took them in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. As much talk as we've had about AJ Dillon this offseason, he's not proven either. So is he a lock to be the RB2 on the team? I don't think so. He certainly is most likely to be based on the draft capital and the little bit that we saw last year. But Kylin Hill is definitely a player I would be chasing.
If they were to go for some reason, like if Aaron Jones went down and they wanted to replace, what he does in the offense, I think Kylin Hill is absolutely the better fit for that role if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, if they're going to look for that slasher, I think what they're most likely to do, and it might be maddening for dynasty managers everywhere, is they're going to try to keep both of those guys as fresh as possible throughout the entire season. So that probably means 11 touches for one guy and 12 for the other. And you're going to need the touchdown and all those things. It'll be rough, but late in the season, hopefully for us Packer fans, that they're healthy. They're both weapons at that point of the season. And all that points to Kylin Hill or somebody else, at least, potentially mixing in from time to time. So we'll see how it plays out. I just like him. I like the way you put it there, Ryan. Priority stash. That's a nice place for him in this list. A really fun one to talk about, guys, because we all play in these Superflex leagues, and the Bears made the big move, of course. It's Justin Fields out of Ohio State, 11th overall. He's going to play earlier than later, right, Ryan? So how confident, I guess, are you? He has some weapons there. Allen Robinson is still there. Cole Kmet is expected to make a little bit of a jump in year 2. And Mooney made his big jump as a rookie and is expected to potentially be even better in his sophomore season. There are players there to help Justin Fields if and when he gets on the field. How confident are you that he can make a big impact for dynasty managers?
Well, when the Bears trade up for a quarterback, what
it always works
wrong?
Out, right?
What could go wrong? No, of course. It's two completely different feelings, even seemingly from Bears fans, compared to that last trade up a few years ago. So, yeah, absolutely a cash play. I'm excited to see Justin Fields on the field. Really excited for Allen Robinson. Honestly, this is the best quarterback he's ever played with already. I feel pretty confident in that. And Andy Dalton's had a nice career, but I think we'll see Fields sooner than later, maybe even week 1. So he's a cash player for me easily.
Matt, How about you? What are you thinking when it comes to Fields?
Yeah, Fields is a cash, assuming, they're pretending that Andy Dalton is going to start for some games, right? So maybe he does, but you have to think Fields is getting on the field in year 1, right? So he's going to provide production. So that means, especially in super flex leagues, any starting quarterback is probably going to end up in the cash category for the most part. So Fields definitely in that place for him, for me as a cash player.
Do you all get held up at all? Sorry, Dan. Do you all get held up at all with the Ohio State quarterback thing? Just that they haven't had success in the NFL?
I try not to get into that stuff. I'm of course a Wisconsin Badgers fan. So many kept saying there's never all these Badgers running backs are so good in college and never been a good one until Melvin Gordon came into the league, and now Jonathan Taylor, and now you never hear that anymore. So Fields has all the tools, right? All the things that we look for and we're excited about. You have to look at them separately from all the other guys that have gone through that school, especially considering the changes in coaches since the last big name at the position and things like that. So I try to stay away from it. I know it exists, though, and that's too bad because, I felt so bad for Fields before the draft because it felt like almost every day, every other day, you'd get this news blurb, something negative about Justin Fields. And it's like, holy cow, what did this guy have to do in college to show you that he's ready to make the leap? And maybe it doesn't work out, but it's not because he chose Ohio State to go to college. It's for another reason.
Yeah.
We used to do this with other schools at other positions too. I think like USC was somebody. It was like a team we didn't want wide receivers from, right?
Sure.
Then Juju came. So I mean, it's just it's a rule until it isn't. So I mean, as much as I certainly want to see Fields succeed, just because I like him as a player and a person, I guess. But as a Packer fan, I wouldn't be too sad if it's another quarterback that doesn't
if it didn't work
out for the Bears. Yeah, like from that perspective, that feels a little bit mean to Fields, but from that perspective,
would you trade Aaron Rodgers?
He's a cool dude,
Trade Aaron Rodgers for Justin Fields right now. NFL trade, not fantasy.
Oh, NFL trade?
Anyway, let's move on to Khalil Herbert and Dazz Newsome. They were 6th round picks by the Bears as well. One a running back, one at wide receiver, Matt. What are we feeling on these guys? There's certainly some room on the Chicago depth chart for these guys to make the team. Can they make an impact for you? Are you willing to stash them?
Newsome, not as much. I think it's Allen Robinson, and the guy we're excited about is Darnell Mooney. Maybe there's a spot for a third pass catcher in the role, but I think Cole Kmet is also going to be more prominently featured. Jimmy Graham's still hanging around, so I think he's probably a trash player for me. But Herbert is definitely a stash, and I think there is a scenario that if David Montgomery it misses some time, then I think he is the perfect hedge against him. I think he can fill right in. He's that low center of gravity kind of running back that I really like to see. I think he's one of the few later round running backs that went off the board in the NFL draft that could profile as at least as an early down runner and maybe even a 3 down back, to be honest with you, with Herbert. So I like grabbing him a lot. Kind of in the same range as you're taking Kylin Hill. So you kind of probably have to take a choice between one of those two. I'm probably taking Herbert if I have to choose between those two. So stash for me on Herbert and trash for Newsome.
Ryan?
That's where I am as well. I was kind of on the borderline with Herbert, honestly, just because of that depth chart. It's not just Montgomery, of course. Tariq Cohen is holding
Damian
down that,
Williams.
and Damian Williams as well, right? So probably too many bodies for Herbert, but I like the player. I was kind of disappointed that he landed there actually, and thought he might be drafted a little higher as well. But ultimately, I'll go stash with him because I do like the talent, and I agree on Newsome.
Yeah, and maybe it'll take a change in scenery. Maybe he has to flash in preseason or in training camp to knock one of those other guys out of the rotation and get him a roster spot. But I agree. Herbert, there's some talent there. There's an opportunity to potentially carve out a role somewhere. So he's a deeper stash, but I'll hold on to him as well. How about the Vikings, Ryan? Their first dip into the skill positions came in round 3, early in round 3, Kellen Mond. So this is a super flex conversation, of course. Are you willing to stash Kellen Mond and hold on to him through the rest of Kirk Cousins' 2 seasons in Minnesota?
I'm willing to hold on to him through Kirk Cousins' final season in Minnesota.
Okay, all right. That guaranteed money, you're fine.
Yeah. I think it's going to make things difficult for sure. We'll see what kind of season they have. Of course, if they bounce back and make the playoffs and have a successful season, then it's probably not a conversation to have. But the guaranteed money he has in 2022, I think, is ultimately the reason they spent this early 3rd round pick on Kellen Mond. So certainly a stash for me.
Yeah, I'll stash him. I'm not super confident that he's ever going to get the priority in terms of being the next starter. He's probably always going to be somebody that has some competition. But if he can get developed, yeah, he could be a player, I guess, in a year.
The Vikings made a couple more picks among skill players.
Trash. Moving on.
If there's anybody among these 3 guys, fellas, that you're stashing, that you're willing to hold on to, who would it be?
It would be Smith-Marsette for me. I think they drafted Smith-Marsette, the receiver, and Nwangwu, the running back, primarily a special teams guys. Both of those players averaged over 26 yards per kick return in college, and it was pretty clear that special teams and the return game was an issue for Minnesota, something they wanted to address. They were aggressive in doing that. And I think it was the 4th and 5th round that they took these two guys. I like Smith-Marsette a little bit more because of their depth chart. They've got the two studs at the top with Jefferson and Thielen, and then it's pretty weak after that. So I could certainly see Smith-Marsette being more of a player outside of the special teams game as well.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, it would be him, but I'm still going to call him trash. Iowa produces offensive lineman and tight end. You guys, you should know this by now. What was we going back to like Marvick McNutt? Like when's the last Iowa wide receiver we see in the NFL? I'm just kidding. I guess I would call him a stash, but maybe after Thielen moves on, maybe there's a role from there. But I think he's closer to trash than he is to ever being cash.
Yeah, I'm thinking trash as well. The last name, we didn't mention it. I can never get the running. Even before the show, I tried to get the running back's pronunciation right, and I was about to say it, and I'm like, I can't. I'll probably mess it up. So
Nwangwu.
Nwangwu, thank you.
Nwangwu, yeah.
Ihmir Smith-Marsette, that's a little easier, and then tight end Zach Davidson is the other name. Inline blocking tight end, probably not going to make an impact outside of he's going to steal a tight touchdown from Irv Smith, and you're going to think to yourself, oh, geez, I had Irv in my lineup. The last team of the episode, guys, the Detroit Lions. This is an interesting one. We mentioned early in the show, Ryan, that Rashod Bateman was the toughest one. I think the second toughest might have been Amon-Ra St. Brown out of USC. 4th round, so not necessarily the draft capital, but Detroit needs wide receivers real bad. So he's got a little bit of draft capital if you look at it from that perspective, although he has to play with Jared Goff as his quarterback and maybe a questionable offensive coaching staff at best. How are we feeling about St. Brown? Is there anything there for us as dynasty managers?
I went cash on St. Brown.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Because of that depth chart and the opportunity. I mean, Tyrell Williams, Rashad Perriman, Quintez Cephas. I think St. Brown is the most talented of those receivers. I know. I mean, I don't know how much that's saying. I was surprised that he fell to the 4th round as well. Thought he could have been a day 2 guy. So I thought the Lions got good value, obviously a position that they need. Williams and Perriman honestly just can't stay healthy. They both have had flashes in their careers of being productive fantasy assets and productive players, but injuries have gotten the best of both of them. So I'll go cash on St. Brown.
Matt,
I'm gonna say cash as well. Again, just mostly because of the situation. Is it a stretch to say that he is second on the team in targets behind, say, Hawkinson? I think it's gonna be one of those two, unless Rashad Perriman or one of these other guys, these kind of also rans, maybe or my boy, I guess, Quentin Cephas kind of steps up. But otherwise, it just seems like that's the role is there for him to take. He is going to maybe occupy a similar area of the field as Hawkinson, kind of in the middle range, especially they use him in the slot where I think he'll probably be the best in the NFL. But he's done it before. He's been the horse of the passing offense before, right? A 19-year-old breakout age, a career 24% dominator rating. So he knows how to be a focal point of a passing offense. So I agree with Ryan. It's not necessarily because of the draft capital or anything other than the situation, but for that reason, I think he could be cash in year 1.
I'm not even. No, I can't do it, guys. I mean, if Cash is 44 catches for 506 yards and 3 touchdowns, then give him Cash. But I think
Hawkinson
he's
must
to
be
trash
catching
than
120. Hawkinson's going to catch 120 balls then.
Well, I think you're underselling those other receivers. They're going to be on the field earlier, and that offense is going to be a run-heavy one. I was back and forth. I started where you guys ended, and now I was like, no, I can't do it. He's a stash at best. And then I got to thinking of my thoughts leading up to the draft, and I just wasn't a real big fan of St. Brown. So I actually think he's closer to trash than he is cash.
Wow.
I think I'm avoiding him in all places. I think it's a trap. We're all going to fall for it, and people are going to think that They're going to get a little early production, and then that'll turn in. Wide receivers are really, really good. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is just good. He's just a good player. He's a real good college receiver. I don't think it's going to translate to the NFL. So I'm actually going to – I put stash on my sheet, but I'm going all the way to trash on it.
Wow.
So we're going to be on opposite ends of the totem pole.
I need to go back and re-listen to see if there was another receiver on this list that you called stash over St. Brown then.
I don't think I did with a receiver. The only other one with a receiver is Amari Rodgers on my list.
I guess
and I guess I did call Anthony Schwartz a deep stash. So, but
yeah, come on.
He at least can run a little bit. St. Brown.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so that's going to do it. Maybe I did that for fun.
Jermar Jefferson?
Oh, yeah, we do have to talk about Jermar Jefferson.
Trash,
yeah, late round running back. I suppose you guys are going cash there?
Trash. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so, though.
Yeah, probably a pass there in rookie drafts. For me, that makes him trash. We have one more division in each conference to do, guys. It'll be the AFC and NFC West. That should be fun. That's coming up next week. Anything before we get out of here, Matt?
No, red list auctions are going on.
Oh, yeah, fun.
I saw you guys were trying to win a Jamar Chase copy. I don't think that's going to work out for you, but you guys seem to do well with limited funds in those rookie auctions every year.
Yeah, so those rookie auctions. That's what makes auctions so much fun. You're one of the lowest end of money, but you just go for the best player you can, right?
Yeah.
Ryan, we've been trying. We're going to get a new league off the ground here.
Yes.
That's been fun the last few days. We've been talking about that on Twitter, so you can hit up at RyanMC23 about that. Also me at DMiler22. And then Matt, you're at Matt Price FF. You have nothing to do with that league, except you're going to be a manager.
I'm going to win it. And
okay. All right. You can win it, but we're starting new leagues. It's that time of year, right? We're all getting excited about these leagues. And so we're starting a new one, and there's probably another one coming down the pike as well. So for Matt and Ryan, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. We'll catch you again next week.